Hello friends and welcome to the YouTube channel of TBL Education Private Limited, where we help you upscale yourself every day by adding a little bit of value. I'm Xavier Nases from Mumbai, and today we're going to be talking about the art of the pitch. This is the latest video in our module that gets you started on your startup journey. And here we're going to be talking about how to make the perfect business pitch. What is a business pitch? A business pitch is the speech, line, or presentation you give when you go into a room full of venture capitalists and potential investors and tell them why they should invest in your company. It is an extremely important part of your startup journey because while it might only take 10 to 15 minutes in practice, its importance to your overall startup journey is incomparable. If you don't do your pitch right, then all the effort you have put into building your startup, into coming up with your idea, into making your product design, all of that will fail completely. Because if you can't communicate what you have worked to a group of people who are willing to pay you for that work, you are not going to get any rewards. In this video, we're going to teach you exactly what you need to say, do, and keep in mind to create the perfect startup pitch. First, hit your listeners fast and hard. Now, you need to realize that when you're coming into that room full of capitalists, there have been thousands of people before you have entered that room, and there'll be thousands of people afterward. As a result, you're already going to be seen as someone who is to some extent expendable. Obviously, the researchers will do some amount of research on you, and if your company is promising, they will count on you. But at the same time, unless you've got that one gold standard company, you can't really count on them giving you the celebrity treatment. So you need to get their attention. Now, don't waste time putting on a performance or building atmosphere. This isn't a theater play. You need to be honest with them. You need to respect them as professionals so that they will respect you. Just give them your content. Don't try any petty psychological tricks. What you need to do is tell them what your product is about as fast as possible and as emphatically as possible. And these people who have looked at thousands of startup founders talking about their products will instantly recognize something good when they see it. But you need to take that first step and you need to level with them. Establish the key hook of your product in the first 15 seconds. People have extremely short attention spans no matter what, and this goes doubly for startup investors. Because, like I've said, they've seen thousands of people coming and going, and they're already they've heard all the tactics, they've seen all the main methods, so they're already pretty used to the whole startup pitch thing. As a result, the only individuality you can really have in this process is your product, not your personality, not your way of speaking, not the type of PowerPoint presentation you're putting on, but your product. So hit them with the key hook of your product in the first 15 seconds. You need to capture their attention in that time. So for the rest of the 15 minutes that you will be talking for, they will be completely wrapped. Set up a problem and explain how you can solve it. I've told you this time and time again. What is startups about? Startups are about finding a problem in society and solving it. At the same time, while you might be aware that something is a problem, and while your consumers might be aware that something is a problem, the same doesn't always go for your investors. A lot of them are very privileged capitalists who sit in corporate offices who have very rich lifestyles and don't always understand the problems of the people. You can't expect them to have done complete research and to already know half of what you're going to say. So explain the problem to them carefully because they need to understand why it is pressing and why there is demand for it. You can't just let your statistics speak to you. You have to get the human element across too. You have to explain to them why there is a crisis and why you are the perfect person for resolving that crisis and making a lot of money in the same time. Next, if you're making a PPT, get everything across in 10 slides. Now, if you make a ton and ton of slides and if you make one slide per sentence, you will be reducing the impact of your slides. For your first or second slide, the startup investors will see only one sentence in the middle of a giant slide and pay attention to it. But after a while, the impact of individual slides will get completely minimized. The impact of a slide on which you put an important bit of text and the impact of a slide on which you put some random image to break up the flow will be completely the same, which will ruin the flow of your presentation. As a result, get everything done in 10 slides. Each slide should be like an act in a movie. It should move the plot forward in a very significant way and it should be indispensable to your presentation. Once you get that across, you will be able to capture startup investors' attention completely. Use a layered structure. One sentence, 1 minute and 5 minutes, each reinforcing the same point in progressively greater detail. First, tell them what your company, what your product is about in one sentence. Because that one sentence is going to be extremely important. This one sentence is not a tagline, it is not a metaphor. Quite simply, it just tells them what your product is about. For instance, I've created a product that allows you to get to space much cheaper and much faster than normal. This establishes what your product is and gets your point across directly. Then you go to the 1 minute structure. Here you explain your modus operandi, how you got from A to B. in the spaceship examples case, explain the kind of fuel that you use, explain the process that you're going to use to get to space, stuff like that. And again, all of this fits into 1 minute because it just tells them that behind your main structure, what kind of technology, what kind of process, what kind of business model lies. And in the next 5 minutes, when you've got some time, you can put your foot on the brake, slow down a little bit, and build on the impressions that you have hammered into the minds of the startup investors. Now that you have made your mark on their minds, you can slowly and surely give them information and let them get to know you. Next, use sound bites, catchy phrases and slogans. Now, in any presentation, there are going to be highs and lows. If your presentation is constantly at 100% energy with amazing lines, the issue is that it will be too good for its own good, right? Because people won't be able to understand what you're trying to say. They won't be able to figure out what's important and what's unimportant. As a result, you need to structure your presentation to create highs and lows. You can't have it be a constantly escalating line from 1 to 100. Create highs and lows like a heartbeat monitor. Create these high sort of places where you put in sound bites, where you put in these very dramatic lines, these very catchy phrases and slogans that convince the investors that this person knows what they're talking about. And once the presentation is done, those sound bites, those slogans will stick in their minds. Even after you walked out of the room, even after the next person has come in and started to present, they should be sticking in your startup investors' minds. Watch pitches online to learn from others. Best way to learn is by looking at other people, by learning from their mistakes and their successes. There are people who come from humbler backgrounds than you, people who have a very rudimentary command of the language, but they've still managed to make the perfect pitch and get their points across because they believed in what they had to say and they knew exactly what information they had to convey. Since they knew what they had to do down to the essentials, they didn't rely on natural talent. They simply figured out exactly what they needed to say to get capitalists and investors to believe in them. So watch their pitches and learn from them. Next, do not create an information overload. Know when to stop talking. Now, if you are making a 15-minute presentation, but you get done in 10 minutes, don't spend those remaining 5 minutes talking again. Because even if your presentation was perfect, that 5 minutes of repetition will completely and totally ruin the impact of your presentation. If you give people too much information, it will be like pouring too much water into a small cup. It will overflow and everything that you work for will be completely ruined. As a result, know when to stop talking. Because your startup investors might not know anything about you, but at the same time, they're also rational human beings who can understand what you're saying. Once you have conveyed a bare minimum of information, you should stop talking because they understand, they get it. And if you keep talking after that, you will be overstaying your welcome. So respect them, respect yourself, and stop. Make a list of likely questions and criticisms. Be ready to switch from talking to responding. Now, this is very important because a mistake that a lot of startup founders make is that they aren't prepared to answer questions. They think that there'll be a nice little question answer session afterward. They prepare a list of potential questions. But the thing is, a lot of investors, a lot of capitalists aren't going to care about your flow. They aren't going to care about your structure. They will often raise their hands in the middle and ask a question directly. And if you are still in pitch mode, if you are still repeating those 20 points that you crammed earlier, then you're going to be in a problem. You're going to stutter, you're going to end up losing your flow, and it will reflect very badly on you as a founder because it will make you seem like this mindless machine who only talks about pre-rendered points. And you can't do that. You have to be spontaneous. So think of your presentation as a conversation that can actively develop into anything rather than a speech that you're giving to a passive audience. Be ready to adapt, and it creates a very positive impression of a startup founder who isn't just talking at people but talking to people. Switch up your pace. Go from information to storytelling to summarization. And this is extremely important because, like I said, you need to create highs and lows. Start out very high. Give them your product's complete list of features. Get across to them what you want to convey and tell them exactly why your product is the product of your future. So once you get all this information across, you create this very nice, strong impression in your mind. Then you switch to storytelling. Calm down, slow your pace, talk about human interest stories, organic stories, your startup journey, how you discovered the startup, all your trials and tribulations, all your ideas, all your test runs, the stories of the consumers, the stories of the people, the stories of their feedback. Slow down and get to let them know you. And then you move to summarization. Everything that you've established so far, tie it up very well. All the subliminal information you've put into people's minds, bring it up to the fore. And this will allow you to end on a high note as well and create this very nice three-act structure. Next, do not beg or act uncertain, but admit it if there are obvious blank spots. One of the biggest challenges for a startup founder is balancing their own image and the interest of investors. If you constantly prioritize yourself and if you act very egotistical, it's going to create a lot of issues. Because the one thing that investors hate is a startup founder who is extremely cocky, who doesn't listen to advice, because such people can run a company into the ground. It is a massive red flag to act overly cocky or arrogant, so don't do it. At the same time, if you have no spine, there are going to be issues too, because a lot of startup investors do act predatory. They are going to ask you very uncomfortable questions. They are going to try and intimidate you and bully you, because in the end, they also want a large share of the equity. And if they can get it simply by bullying a startup founder or by taking advantage of their insecurities, it'll be very convenient for them. So you need to stand your ground and establish to them that you are not a pushover. If there are blank spots, admit it. A lot of the times your company hasn't performed as well as expected. There will be obvious sectors in which you did meet expectations. But obviously, you shouldn't let that derail your startup journey. Startup investors will ask you, why did you underperform here? And if you constantly act like it's not your fault, if you blame it on someone else, or if you just argue with them, then it's going to establish that you're the kind of person who doesn't see the ground on even the most obvious points, which just makes you seem stupid rather than persistent. So know when to lose and know when to stand your ground. Lastly, go in this progression. First, talk about yourself. Who are you? What are your traits? Why are you the perfect person to build a startup? Why were you the only person who could have come up with this idea? Why are you special? Because venture capitalism is as much about investing in people as it is about investing in products, sales, and statistics. You need to establish yourself as a person who can stay at this company's helm for all the years to come. So here you need to sell yourself. Next, the product. Now talk about your product. Once you've established your identity, then establish the product's identity. Because these two identities are integral to the future of the startup. Your vision and the way people perceive the product. A mix of these two will create your company's brand identity. Then give people the statistics. Tell them exactly how much your company has succeeded, the sectors where they excel, all the numbers. But don't give them too many statistics, because too many numbers will cause people's brains to shut off. Give them just enough information to establish that your company is viable, that it isn't going to randomly sink, that it works well, it works as expected, and it is something that they can count on. Then switch to the emotional side. You have established the rational side. Now tell them all the stories I told you about. Your startup journey, the stories of the people, how a consumer will look at your product in a store, integrate your product into their lives, how they'll interact with your product, how they will make your product their own. Get those stories across and make them feel like the product already exists. Like it isn't just something in a market, but something that people can connect with. Then talk about competitors. Biggest mistake you can make as a startup founder is to say, I have no competitors. Because if you say that, it establishes that you have no business sense and are simply someone who came up with a good idea and found mild amounts of success. There are always competitors no matter where you are. And even if they aren't competitors now, there will be competitors in the future. You need to admit that these competitors exist. You need to accept the possibility that they can do things better than you. And you need to tell your startup investors how you are going to stay ahead of those competitors, because there is nothing as scary to investors as competition, because it represents another opportunity that they can take. It's your job to explain to them why they shouldn't take that opportunity and why they should invest in you, who's there before them right here and right now. Next, talk about your vision. Your vision is an extremely important part of the startup journey. Now, you can't just think that if they give me money, then I'll think about the next step. You need to assume that they're going to give you the money. Even though you're only at the seed stage, you need to assume that your company is already going to move all the way to Series C. You need to have a vision of your company as a national or a global superpower, because once you've got that idea in your head, your confidence will be infectious and inspire the startup investors as well. So get that confidence across, because a lot of people, even if their companies underperform statistically, even if nobody really likes or understands their product, can coach their way forward through simple vision, through the power of dreams. And if you master that, your startup journey and your pitch will get a whole lot better. Then summary. Summarize all your points, get all your information across, create a nice little package that has everything that the company investors need to know, and hand it over to them. And lastly, sign off. Here you formally let them know that your presentation has ended. You say, this is me, this is it, I'm done here. And once you sign off, you can formally conclude your startup process, so that the investors will know that the ball is in their court and now they can switch to thinking mode too. Don't pursue aggressively and don't constantly hound them, but also don't end on a very wishy-washy note. Establish that this is how far you have come, this is what you have said, and then stop, move out, and give them the time they need to think and to approve you. That is everything that you need to create the perfect startup pitch. That's all for this video. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you have any doubts, comments, or inquiries, spell them out in the comment section and we will address them. Remember that the world is full of innovators and TVL Education wants to reach out to each and every single one of them. Thank you very much.